today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a synth that I made in the Polygrid that was inspired by the Obernheim 4-voice synthesizer. So the Obernheim 4-voice was a late 70s synthesizer, notable for the fact that it was one of the first synthesizers to have more than one voice. It had 4 different synthesizer expander modules, each that had 2 oscillators. So it had 4 oscillators total. It was still a monosynth, but it was notable for having more than a single voice. And then within a couple of years, of course, it became a little bit obsolete. But nonetheless, it's still capable of some interesting sounds. And I was recently listening to an interview with Jamie XX, and he noted that the Obernheim 8-voice, which would be an expanded version of this, was one of his favorite and most valuable possessions. And personally, I was just looking for a project to keep me from buying Serum 2. And so I thought that this would be a good way to do so, and it's been a lot of fun. So I'm going to go through what I've done with this patch. I'm going to start with the very first version that I had kind of posted up on Bitwiggers. And so the first version was a very simple sort of affair where we had an LFO module, an oscillator module, and these were duplicated 3 different times and then fed into a mixer with a little bit of saturation. And there was nothing too remarkable about this. I mean, we're just using the byte oscillator here, standard LFO with the target being selectable. And this is capable of some great sounds, of course. But it wasn't all that true to the original instrument. And so I've spent a lot of time over the past couple of weeks refining this and making it a little bit closer to what the original instrument would have been. So that was version 2 of that. I've since made it to version 8. And so here, what I've done is I've actually abstracted the synthesizer and the LFO into a user interface to the best of my ability within Polygrid. Of course, it's kind of difficult to do that in the grid. There's no dedicated interface design. So got to do the best that we can. But this is much closer to what you would find on the original instrument. So there was a polyphonic synthesizer programmer that you used to kind of tune each of the 4 oscillator modules. And then you can go into each of the individual modules and do some additional customization to create different sounds. I'm going to quickly walk through this just to give everyone sort of an overview of what we're doing. So the first row here is really around the pitch. And so you can tune the 2 oscillators in each of the synthesizer expander modules. This is based on the byte oscillator. So you have a pitch for oscillator 1, and then you have a pitch offset for oscillator 2 for your tuning. You also have the ability to tune the octave. I don't exactly remember how many octaves, but I believe it's plus or minus 4 octaves. And then you have your filter cutoff frequency. There are 2 sets of envelopes. The envelope 1 controls amplitude. Envelope 2 controls the filter. I've implemented a vibrato aspect to this. And so I believe this initial synth patch is basically just a unison saw patch. So you can make some pretty good resounding sounds with this initial patch. Beyond that, I've implemented a couple of additional features. So here we have an output selector. And so what you can do is you can either select it to combined, which means that the signal from all 4 of the synthesizer expander modules will be going out through this mixer, through some saturation, and then out. When you select this on, what happens is the output from each of the modules goes out independently, and then using a DC offset in the FX chain, you can capture the signal of each of these individually. Hats off to Polarity for showing this recently in a YouTube video. Aside from that, there's a round robin function. So the original had the capability when this was switched on to basically cycle through each of the synthesizer modules on successive key strokes. And this allows for that capability. The original instrument had a little bit more flexibility there. This is a fairly basic implementation, but it was more than sufficient for what I wanted to implement in this particular case. Then you have master pitch and glide as well. And there's a mixer here where you can adjust your levels, solo, panning, and things like that. I included a VU meter here as well, just for visual sake. It can be helpful. Beyond that, the individual synthesizer modules are below. There are 4 identical modules, and they follow a similar layout to the programmer above. So you have pitch in this first row. The second row is for the LFO. So you can select the LFO target, and that can be either the filter, which would be left, pitch, which is in the middle, and then pulse width modulation, which would be on the right. You can select the rate, and I've designed the rate to work such that from 0 to about 50% takes you from 0 to 1 hertz, and then from about 50 to 75 starts getting you into audio rate categories, into the audio rate range, and then beyond 75 up to 100, you're at audio rate. So you can do some very interesting things with the LFO in terms of filter and pitch modulation. And then, of course, you can choose the strength of the effect of the LFO on each of those parameters. You have pulse width controls here along with FM. The original 4-voice did not have FM, of course, but I thought it would be a useful feature here, and given that the byte oscillators have that as an option, I chose to implement it. You have volume controls for each oscillator in each module, as well as sync. And then envelope 1 for amplitude and envelope 2 for filter. In the middle, you have a display for the LFO rate. I find this useful to look at, particularly when you hit audio rate, because you can tune the LFO frequency to whatever notes you're playing and get some interesting effects that way. This controls the strength of envelope 2's influence on your filter cutoff. And that in combination with the VCF mod allows you to select both the strength as well as the direction of the modulation. And this knob in particular is for both the envelope 2 and for the LFO. You have your filter frequency, your filter resonance, and filter type. So you have low pass, high pass, I believe it goes band pass, and then notch. And then you have a selector for the wave type of the oscillator. So to the left is saw, and to the right is pulse. So with those controls, you have your basic control over the timbre of your sounds. And then, of course, having these 4 modules, I think the intent on the original was that you would kind of tune each of these to, the 3rd or the 7th in a scale to give you the ability to make chords. Obviously, there's a lot less flexibility than you would have on a sort of modern polyphonic synthesizer, but I think that was the original intent. And as I go through some of the examples of the patches, you can see that you can still do some interesting things, even though it's a monophonic synthesizer. The guts of this thing are a little more complicated. It would take me a full hour to go through each of these controls individually. But if we take a look at some of the more interesting things, so we have our output selection module here. This uses a selector module to determine whether the signal will go directly to the mixer or out through these modulators to the DC offsets in the FX chains. We have a round robin module here, just using some basic logic, as well as the counter to determine whether the signal will pass through all 4 oscillators or whether individual ones will be selected at any given time. On the synth itself, nothing too much has changed. I have updated the LFO section pretty significantly. So you can see that this curves module is used to control the frequency of the LFO, starting off very slow, giving you a lot of control up to about 1 hertz. And then as you transition into audio rate category, it goes up pretty quickly. The original synthesizer is known for having quite a bit of pitch drift, so I've implemented that here. It's a very, very minor amount of pitch drift, but it is and can be noticeable, particularly if you're trying to tune the oscillators. It can be a little bit frustrating, but it also, I think, leads to some really interesting timbres overall. You can see that because none of the, like the value knob in the grid doesn't have, say, preset points, we can use steps modules to control the values that go to different functions. So here this is used to choose the routing for the LFO. Here we have different octaves. Here is for filter type, etc. Aside from that, this is really a basic subtractive synthesizer. And, for the most part, it programs just like any basic subtractive synthesizer. Now, obviously, one cool thing here, if I compare this to, for example, Serum 2, which is the probably most state-of-the-art synthesizer on the market currently, probably the most flexible. It looks pretty static. You have these modules, but everything in here, because it's Bitwig, is completely modulable. You can modulate all of these parameters. And so even though it seems fairly basic, at the same time, you can achieve almost every sound that you want to between what's available here within the synthesizer and what's available out here within your effects chain, as well as the modulation. So beyond what's in the patch itself, in the grid, there are some macros that are here. So we have this first page, which gives you basic control over pitch, filter frequency, the round robin and the chains, as well as vibrato. There's the envelopes that you can change, as well as the mixer here. So this gives you basic controls, and obviously if you have a controller attached, you can use the knobs on your controller to control each of these parameters. That is my quick overview of what this synthesizer does and how it looks. I've included instructions as to what each of the knobs does within the patch itself, if you decide that you want to investigate this thing a little bit more. Okay, stepping outside of the grid, I have a few examples of some different sounds that I have created using this. So this first is kind of a basic percussion synth sound. Kind of use it for some percussive elements. It's a detuned sound that is fairly interesting. Obviously running through a bit of reverb and delay there. This second is a bit of an atmospheric sound. It plays well with pitch bend. Very nice sort of spooky timbre there. The next patch here is more of a kind of a traditional pad sound. For this song that I was playing in the intro of the video, I have it going through a trance gate. But if we turn that off, you can hear that it's a basic, it's tuned to a minor chord. Very nice sound there, I think. And then this is a bit of a pluck sound that I have going through a arpeggiator. Also some nice sounds here. One thing that I like about this patch in particular, or the sound in particular, is that I've tuned the LFOs for the voices a little bit different and how they affect the filter cutoff. And so different voices come in and out of focus depending on the time. So a very cool sort of acidy tone there. Fun to play with. And then this is just a very basic bass sound. Nothing real fantastic here, but something like that plays well with all of these sounds that I've shown. I've been able to create a number of other sounds with this, respaces, things of that nature. It's been a pretty fun experiment. It's given me access to a whole world of kind of new sounds, because it tends to kind of go out of tune pretty easily. It leads to quite a bit of experimentation. And I've found myself wanting to record the output of the instrument directly without kind of working with MIDI, to kind of give more of that kind of old school sample based workflow. Okay, that's all I have for now. This is the very first video I've ever made with regards to production, so I hope that you found it useful, and I hope you'll give this patch a try. It's up on Bitwiggers if you want to take a look. Thanks.